Hello and welcome to Cruising and Musing. This is like the 17th attempt of me trying to record a response to Dr. Souza, who did a video on Friday about students and administrators and discipline and where we should be going next with such things. And the issue with this video is that I over-explain my positions and then I run out of time to explain the solution that Dr. Souza actually asked for. So if you haven't already subscribed to Dr. Souza, he is an Echelon education consultant, and we're going to be talking about answers to his solutions. And I also recommend checking out his friend, a woman who runs a channel, and I forget her name offhand, called Teacher Therapy. Particularly a video she did a few years ago about teaching underprivileged minority students, because she makes a great expression of striking a balance between accountability and empathy in dealing with each student. And I think that's what's really at play here is we are in the situation we are in with student discipline because we have gone way too far off the rails of being fully empathetic towards the student and never wanted to hold the students accountable for anything, to the point where it's now eroded what discipline we had, and the kids no longer know what it means to be held accountable. So when they are held accountable, they break down or they have an emotional reaction, which elicits the empathy again, and we move past it, and they haven't learned a lesson out of it. And so this is what I think needs to be done to fix the system. And I'm going to take this grade school, middle school, well, let's do grade school, secondary, and maybe I'll divvy it up between the two secondaries. But on the elementary school level, Dr. Souza, I'm sorry. I know it's got to be barbaric, but we need to bring back corporal punishment. Young children are not mentally developed enough to understand advanced concepts of right and wrong and justice. And there is no point in us going through a 60-minute process because a 8-year-old told a teacher to go fuck themselves when they were told to open a book to page 102 so that they can start the lesson. The fastest and quickest fix to that is, calling the dean down to drag them out of the class and giving them 10 good licks across the backside with a leather strap. You do it 3 or 4 times, it's got to be done with. Now, I don't think the teachers need to do it. I do think it needs to be administered by a specific person, aka the dean. It should be recorded. And if possible, a parent present if they want to come down, but the student should not be returned to class until the punishment is done. And I think that would solve 80% of it on this, primary level. But what's going to solve a lot of these issues too is give the kids back their playtime. I observed an elementary classroom down near the end of the school year, just because things had slowed down. My students weren't doing their work, so I didn't have much work to do myself. And I, promised myself I wasn't going to beg each child and plead with them for them to do their work, that I was going to let them fail with dignity on my side for once. So I had a little time. I observed an elementary classroom, and I remember in elementary school that, we had like carpet playtime with toys and whatnot, at least 2 or 3 times a day. We had recess if we didn't have that. And, there was like a really good balance between kinetic learning and social learning and that play style learning that you do as a small child, and quiet, sit still time, at least until I moved out of the downtown school and I went to the suburb school. Once I went to the suburb school, they expected us to sit on our hands for 8 hours and, shove Ritalin down my throat when I couldn't do that. But I don't want to get off on that as a tangent yet. So, but I do want to say we need to stop giving, children under the age of 12 psychosomatic meds. Like, their bodies are developing, their hormones are going on, their serotonin levels are in flux, their body chemistry is in flux. We shouldn't be given psychiatric medication to students that are under the age of 12 at the very least. I want to say under the age of 16. By the time they're 16, their brains are developed enough. You should be able to do a Saad diagnosis, but a little kid doesn't deserve to get medicated and have who they are changed by a pill. And that's what happened to me. And I don't want to get into that on this, but for primary school, bring back corporal punishment so it's a fast, quick, effective punishment. It happens almost immediately after, because just like training a dog, if the dog does something you don't want him to do, you've got like a very small window where you can correct the dog, and the dog understands that they're being told no, bad girl, for what they just did. Otherwise, they're just confused and know you're angry at them. Same thing with a child. You need to directly connect the punishment with the action that they are taking, I honestly feel like corporal punishment's got to do a lot more to, bring that in as a punitive measure and corrective measure than anything else, because it's immediate, it's readily apparent, and it's worked for, 60,000 years, give or take, of, modern humans being in societies. That being said, again, it needs to be recorded, done by the same person every time, and it needs to be prescribed fairly, no more treating students differently based on anything. Diversity, inclusion, and equity concerns need to go out the window. School staff, teachers, administrators, everyone need to have qualified immunity to carry out their duties in the name of student discipline and student safety, so that when the white dean is giving a black student their 5 licks for being a disrespectful, disruptive pain in the ass, to teach them not to be that disruptive, disrespectful pain in the ass anymore, that there's no slaughter show in the news, or if there is, there's nothing anyone can do about it, because you've got that legal protection of that qualified immunity. That being said, again, we need more recess, more playtime for the kids so they can get being a kid out of their system. We have an unreasonable expectation on students for the amount of time we expect them to sit and pay attention. Hell, at my age, at the age of 35, when I'm sitting in an hour-long staff meeting, chances are I'm not paying attention during the whole thing. And when I'm in an hour-and-a-half staff meeting, even my coworkers are going like, oh my God, we need a break. We need 15 minutes. I need a snack. I need to pee. I need water. So if we ourselves as adults can't do that, why would we expect kids to be able to? Especially if it's something that's not interesting for them. Just no, we need to lighten up on this lower, they're trying to cram everything into primary school. Reading, writing, and arithmetic's good enough. Teach them how to read and write using the history textbook, and they can learn, their history implicitly instead of explicitly, and teach them, use science stuff in math, and they can pick up on some science concepts, again, implicitly instead of explicitly. It'll work out pretty good, because most of the little kids aren't going to remember facts about, the state capitals and things like that. We can get that later on. But what we can't do is teach them to read, write, and do everything else later on, where they could, learn the stuff that, if they have the tools to learn, that's what we need to be giving them in elementary school, the tools to learn. On the secondary level, here in Florida, if a kid rides a bicycle without a helmet and a cop sees them, their parent can be issued a ticket. It's a point on their driver's license, and the last I checked, a $100 fine. Here to guess how many kids I see riding bicycles without their helmets on? Not very many. Down to the hood where I live, up in the yuppie areas of town, I don't see kids without helmets on their heads as they're on bicycles. And it's because of that, and that's a thing from, the age of, as early as you can ride a bicycle, all the way up to 16. Once the kid has their own driver's license, and they're under the age of 18 riding a bicycle, then they get the $100 fine, and they get a point on their license for not riding the bike. And I feel like this is a system that we could bring forth into the schools of, this is where we eventually amplify. So again, qualified immunity, DIE standards are thrown out the window so everyone has equal justice. I'll get into that more later, because that's where I get ranty and I want to get the video done this time. Secondary kids, start holding the parents accountable for the student's behavior. So, and also we need to get rid of zero tolerance things. Like, it's not right that if we have 3 students beat up 1 student and the student they're beating up fights back because they don't want to get their ass beaten half to death. They're defending themselves. The child defending themselves shouldn't be given the punishment the others are given. Those kind of stupid zero tolerance rules, like what I grew up in, being in place in school, that's abusive, especially to our boys. But it also, completely makes the students vulnerable to bullies in a way that we should not be encouraging. Getting back on track here, though, I'm going to again say more free time, more unstructured socialization time, more structured energy release time put into the school day for the students. I've talked to high school students about this, and they've all agreed wholeheartedly that, if they started at a more reasonable hour, instead of having to start at 7:15, at which they got to get up at 5:30 in the morning for school, if they instead started at, 8:15, 8:30, 9 out of 10 of them all say they would do much better. In fact, a lot of my virtual school students say that they came to us for high school because they couldn't deal with the high school schedule of having to get up that early every single day because, mom and dad might work night shift. So, they're getting woken up when mom and dad get home, and they're not getting dinner until 8 o'clock, and they can't, eat dinner at 8 o'clock, go to bed at 9, get up at 5. That shit just doesn't work for them. Whereas, a more reasonable schedule like what adults have is something that they can do and perform well at. Again, just kind of like on the elementary school, if college-educated adults can't sit for 90 minutes without fussing that they need a break and time to get up and socialize and move around and give their brains a break, same thing for the kids. Let's give secondary and kids, both levels, more downtime while they're at school. It has to be supervised downtime, but give them some time. Think about what it would be like if you had 80-minute class periods with 15 minutes between each class. And if lunch was also 80 minutes and the kids had time to, access to, the gymnasium and the baseball or basketball courts and whatnot, so they could, go get some food, get a pickup game in, have some time, and, they're being observed and they're under the safety of the school umbrella at the same time. Think about the quality of life change that would be for some students. And honestly, what are we doing with a lot of the electives that we teach, that we pack their day with? Is there any reason why we need to have a kid, give them their 4 main and give them 2 electives? Band and choir, done. Or band and PE, done. There should be enough flexibility in a 6-class day for them to get everything that they need and be able to have more of this time to be human in a supervised environment around their peer groups. It'll probably do a lot to sort out their mental health and do a lot to just, again, help them get the jitters out, get them, refocused for the next class and moving on. It would be very helpful. Most of the students I've talked to have all been like, oh my God, I would actually like going to school if it was set up like that. So that's something you can do to help solve discipline, is make school more pleasant for them to be in. And again, if you're not willing to put up with being in a situation as an adult, why are you expecting teenagers to endure it? They don't have the tools we do. And then this has got to bring me up to, I said I would, throw this on the back burner, but we need to make sure that we are, not buying into the false narrative of equity being a greater level of fairness. True fairness is equality of opportunity. All of us get dealt different cards when we are born, and some of us have different needs, and the school's job is to accommodate those learning needs and provide everybody with an education. It is not the school's job to try to equalize all the advantages and disadvantages that born in a multicultural society the way that it seems to be trying to do. We do not need to take into account a student's socioeconomic status, race, religion, or anything else when they're being given a punishment. If their religion says that the punishment is a sin to be given that punishment, like I know among the Hmong people, touching a child's head is considered like a taboo thing. But let's say that for whatever reasons, for some religion, getting spanked on the ass is a taboo thing for the religion. Well, then that person should value their religion enough to follow the rules and not trigger that punishment. If the punishment is that you're going to have to come to the school on Saturday for Saturday school, and you and the squad of other delinquents are going to walk along the streets around the school and pick up the trash and trim bushes and hedges for the old people in the neighborhood, well, then that's, what your punishment's going to be. In fact, I think that would be a much better punishment than OSS, is making them serve, weekend school underneath a sheriff's deputy and a supplemental position for a teacher or educator of some kind, and make them go around and service the community that they're being disrespectful to by wasting the tax dollars when they fuck around in school. That sort of thing is a very, not only is the punishment punishing them for doing wrong, but the punishment's creating a good in the community as well. It's just like, prisoners working on a chain gang. There's a reason why the 13th Amendment did carve out that forced labor was allowable as punishment for a crime. And, so we should bring that back. And, if the kid doesn't show up to their Saturday school punishment, then the next weekend the sheriffs show up, and mom or dad, they get to pick who goes to prison for the weekend. And you're like, oh my God, that's extreme. Go back to my bicycle example. Start fining the parents for what they do. And when their kids don't show up when they've reached that level of law enforcement being involved with the school punishment, then it's time for the parents to start getting pulled into it too. Maybe after the third time that, dad and son have had an ankle bracelet connecting them as they walked down a, side of a interstate spearing the garbage, cleaning up litter. Maybe, just maybe, dad will have a come to Jesus talk with his son about his son's behavior, and it'll get through. It is what it is. And, for the kids who don't have parents, I mean, obviously you're going to have to find another way to escalate. Or, just keep giving them the same punishment, but find a way to make them do it. If it's a, kid without a parent, say they're in the foster system, well, you've got, some Saturday school, you got to go in and clean up stuff because you were a douche, and then they don't show up to Saturday school. Well, the popo's waiting there when they get off the bus, the following Friday. They go to juvie for the weekend. Let them see what it could be. And I'm not talking like, juvie is in, let's put them into the hardcore, maximum security juvie with the kids that murder people. But, like, the low security juvie where, you're just going to have them on hand to make them go out Saturday morning and do their punishment. And now maybe they have to have 2 days because they skipped out on it one day. So they got to do it Saturday and Sunday. then be back to school on Monday, no big deal. And I think that would go a long way. And I know these things are draconian. I know that this is completely against everything that, like, we have stood for on, you know, like, being against mass imprisonment. I'm against mass imprisonment. The drug war, stupid things, sending people to jail over nonsense. But, you know, we're not talking life sentences here. We're not talking month sentences. We're talking about creating a form of discipline reprisals that are unpleasant enough to where the kids are actually daunted by the idea of going through them. And these can only be given out for direct behavioral issues. If a kid is tardy to class every day at first period because their bus is late every day, that's a systemic issue. That's not the kid's fault. The kid gets a bye. If the kid is late to school every day because their parents drop them off late every day, you go for the parent. You leave the kid alone. The kid's not doing anything wrong. Now, if the parent comes by and, you know, it's because the kid won't get out of bed, well, after the first time you get the parent, trust me, they'll make sure the kid gets out of bed. And if not, then they're a failure as a parent. And, you know, the system is giving them their just desserts. You know, and again, the qualified immunity for staff, so you can give these punishments without it coming back on you like you're some sort of monster for having done it. That would be another important part of this, and very reasonable. And yeah, Dr. Souza, I know that this probably isn't what you expected, but this is what I truly think. Some things you can read and look up, you know, that play into this, especially the importance of obliterating CRT, DIE, oppression Olympics kind of thinking, and the caving into it. Saad, the Parasitic Mind, Jonathan Haidt, Dr. Jonathan Haidt, rather, and Dr. Saad. But Dr. Haidt, he has 2 books, The Righteous Mind and the Coddling of the American Mind. Highly recommend both. Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, because we want to teach students to take ownership of the situation. He's a former SEALs commander, and, you know, it's all about, you know, yes, something might not be your fault, but it's still something that you dropped the ball on. Therefore, you know, take ownership of it and learn to do better next time, so that when next time comes around, the ball doesn't get dropped. And it's, you know, in exact opposition of, you know, everything we teach the kids today of, you know, it's not your fault, it's your parents' fault. It's not your fault, it's the teacher's fault. It's not your fault you lost your temper. They were picking on you, and what have you. I would also say, and this is going to be like the final point, but do some extra reading on, like, the effects of Ritalin and Adderall and the other pills they like to give young boys when they can't sit still in primary school. The all too common ADD, ADHD diagnosis, which really is, you know, a lot of times kids being kids. I suffered from, you know, being misdiagnosed and having pills shoved down me for 8 years. I would invite you to do some research on those pills and what those chemicals do when they are present in the body of a normal person, and the kind of misery that we could be subjecting our kids to. Because, for example, I was on Ritalin for 8 years against my will, and one of the side effects of Ritalin is general irritability and rage. If you're not a student, if you're somebody who has normal brain chemistry, that's what it can bring up in you. Again, rage and general irritability. And then think about where this brings us with the mental health of students, and how they're going to behave, and how this just might be part of the reason why we're starting to see more mass shootings and school violence, or violence targeted at schools. That combined with, you know, the fact that the kids witness the injustice of equity justice in schools when DIE gets involved and gets complicated. I'm going to cut this video off here, before I get on another tangent, I'm glad we finally got it done. Talk to you later.